morning, everyone. It's so good to see you again. So today, I'm really excited about our speaker today. We have Dr. Kerry Burnight, and I just wanted to give you a couple of reminders before we talk about Kerry. Just a practical thing, do this with me. Get your rectangles and just turn them down, turn them off. Or if you have them, just put them on vibrate. And so also I wanted to remind you to stay with us through the question and answer series. After 11 o'clock, we'll have time to ask questions of Dr. Burnight. And I also wanted to tell you, the next couple of weeks are going to be exciting too. Today, of course, we have a theme of advocacy for us, right? And so, you know, we all have to age, but let's do it brilliantly, right? And then next week we will have an inside look from the justice system. What about the advocates for the littlest victims? So we will have a deputy district attorney come and talk to us, who is also a professor at Chaffey College, and that is Karen Schmaus. And the week after, an advocate for animals, another deputy district attorney. So we're going to have an inside view from the justice system. But right now, I am excited to talk about Dr. Burnight, and I just want to say a few things about her. She is one of our nation's leading gerontologists. She's spent her entire professional career on a mission to improve the lives of seniors. She was a professor of geriatric medicine and gerontology at the University of California, Irvine for 19 years. She is the founder and director of the nation's first elder abuse forensic center and national nonprofit Ageless Alliance, United Against Elder Abuse. Kerry has spoken at the White House and continues to call for solutions to prevent elder abuse. Her research focuses upon strength, meaning, and connection in longevity. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from UCLA and her PhD in Gerontology at the University of Southern California. She has also appeared, you may have seen her, on television to speak on the Dr. Phil show, CBS News, Money Matters, and The Doctors. And now we have the great pleasure of having Dr. Burnight. Please give her a warm welcome.
Okay. Well, aging brilliantly. If this isn't preaching to the choir, I don't know what is. But I'm going to try. So I wanted to tell you that I've been a gerontologist since birth. Here's how it happened. In the 1960s, my parents lived up in Northern California in Hillsborough, and they had two teenagers. They were just in sight of the kids heading off to college, and the heavy lifting was over, and their kids were graduating high school. And like her friends, my mom was experiencing some changes. She went to the doctor to talk about her menopause symptoms. And she was tired, she was hot, she felt like she wanted to punch people. And now that I'm in my 50s, I can't really commiserate. And in fact, I have a new thing now where I have to always wear a shirt that I can take my jacket off because I get so hot all the time. So this is likely to happen. I just want to warn you in case I need to take it off. So the doctor at that time, his medical opinion just brought her turned her into a puddle of tears. She was, in fact, not at the finish line of parenting, but at the beginning of parenting. And 9 months later, at almost 10 pounds, I was born. I was a tiny, chubby, gerontologist. My dad was entirely gray from the minute I was born. I took it upon my 3-foot-old self to stand up for my dad and every other gray superhero and person and human that I came across. So anytime anyone would say anything ageist, I was right there saying, oh no, older people can do the 3-legged race, So it was in me. I was born like that. And I hadn't any idea that that was a job or that could be a career until I was in a room about as big as this. And a woman came in from back east and announced herself as a gerontologist. And I said, what? Oh, wow. Now we're talking. And I weaseled my way down from the very top and through the crowd going the other way. And she told me that the leading school of gerontology, that was the first in the nation at that time, 30 years ago, was in LA also. And so I drove my beat-up car from UCLA over to our rival school, and I had a big UCLA sticker on it. And I went in and I talked to them about this thing I'd learned of, this word called gerontology, the study of aging. I was really enthused. Went back out to my car, and on the windshield is just a tremendous loogie spit on my windshield. And it was because I had erroneously and rudely kept my UCLA sticker on. So I carefully peeled my UCLA sticker off and enrolled at USC, where I spent 5 years. And despite that inauspicious beginning, I adored the study of aging. It was the biological, physiological, sociological, economic complexity and variety that was and is fascinating. So what most interested me about aging was the fact that we're still figuring out what keeps us happy and healthy throughout the whole journey, all the way to 120 or whatever we're going to end up being. And my frame of reference was my mom's mom, Charlotte, and my dad's mom, Etta. They both were of the same socioeconomic status. They both had very similar health conditions, that is hypertension, pretty pronounced arthritis. And they were both widows. They were both the same age. And yet, they could not have been more different people. Charlotte, I couldn't wait to get to her house. She would save those things that are inside pantyhose, that's like a white piece of paper that's kind of a wonderful piece of cardboard. She would acquire all of those, and we would create art projects with those. And tell me stories about when she was a teacher, and she would tell me about the naughty children. And as a child, I just couldn't get enough of hearing about naughty children. Then there was Etta, who, same kind of situation, but I could not stand going there. And, I feel bad about it now as an adult, but she was just always telling me what was wrong and what hurt. And she's trying to get a hold of me, and she's like all this stuff in her teeth. And it was just like rough, And so I had these two very different frames of reference for myself in my own aging journey. So my research has been guided by that fascination with the choices that people make and how these choices work out for them. And I thought, what if we could follow someone all throughout their life and watch the trajectory of their life? What if we could study people from the time that they were teenagers all the way to old age to see what really keeps people happy, healthy, engaged, and like Charlotte, not so much like Etta? Guess what? Researchers at Harvard did exactly that. And it's a study that I am not involved in, and I wish I was. But it's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. It's the longest study of adult aging that exists in the world. For 75 years, they've tracked the lives of 724 men year after year, asking about their work, their home lives, their health, and all along the way, not knowing how it's going to turn out because they're studying as they go. Studies like this are exceedingly rare. Almost all projects of this kind fall apart within decades because the funding dries up, the researchers move on to something else, the researchers pass away, the researchers don't have a legacy plan to pass on from director to director, but not the Harvard Health Study. It continues today, and it's on its 4th director, and they have each been magnificent leaders. Through a combination of luck and persistence, that group of 724 men started 75 years ago. There are 60 alive today. They're still participating in the study, and most of them are in their 90 and above. And now, most excitingly, they're adding their 2,000 children to the study. And since 1938, they've tracked the lives of 2 groups of men. The first group started in the study when they were sophomores at Harvard. Oh, is that better? Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, my name's Kerry Burnight. Okay, so if that happens again, that I take a little vacation with my voice, put your hand up and say, I can't hear you. Okay, so that's better. I'm focusing. Okay, so they studied 2 groups of men. The first group started when they were sophomores at Harvard. They all finished college during World War II, and then they went off to serve in the war. The second group there were a group of boys from Boston's poorest neighborhoods, boys who were chosen for the study specifically because they were very disadvantaged in a number of ways. Somebody raising their hand? Am I doing the weird talking again? Okay, all right, perfect. Now I'm paranoid. So they recruited these samples in the 1930s. Most of the disadvantaged boys lived in tenements, many without running water, or if they did, they had just cold water. When they entered the study, all the teenagers were interviewed, both the Harvard guys and the Boston disadvantaged guys. They were all given medical exams, and they went into the homes and they interviewed the fellows' parents as well. It is now 9:49. Okay. And then, when the teenagers grew into adults, they entered all walks of life. Some became factory workers, some became lawyers, some became bricklayers and doctors, and one of the sample became a president of the United States. Some developed alcoholism, a few developed schizophrenia, some climbed the social ladder all the way from the very bottom up to the very top. Some did the exact opposite, from their startings at Harvard down to some very difficult situations at the end of life. The founders of the Harvard Longitudinal Study would have never in their wildest dreams imagined that I'd be standing here today telling you about this study that still continues. Every 2 years, the patient and dedicated research staff calls up the men and asks them, would it be okay if we yet again send you surveys about your life? Many of the inner city Boston men would ask, why do you want to keep studying me? My life just isn't that interesting. The Harvard men never asked that question. To get the clearest picture of these lives, they are interviewed in their living room. Their medical records are poured over. We also got access to their blood and scans of their brain. They got to talk to their children, and also they videotaped them talking about their lives and their deepest concerns. And when, about a decade ago, the wives were finally included, the first thing they said was, "It's about time." So, what did the Harvard longitudinal study learn about aging, and what can we take from it in our whole lives, whether we are now in our 50s, 60s, 70s, and 100s? You're wondering, aren't you? The clearest message we got was this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Period. Across the board. Whether the boys were from these very disadvantaged situations or from these relatively lucky positions, it mattered what their relationships were like. It mattered the quantity, but more important, the quality of these relationships. Loneliness kills. It turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, friends, and community are happier, they're physically healthier, and they live longer than people who are less well connected. And the experience of loneliness and isolation turns out to be toxic. People who are more isolated than they want to be find that they are less happy, their health declines earlier in midlife, and their brain functioning declines sooner. And the sad fact is that any given time, more than 1 in 5 Americans will report feeling lonely. And you know that you can be lonely in a crowd, you can be lonely in a marriage. So the second big lesson that we learned, it's not just the number of friends you have, and it's not whether you're in a committed relationship or divorced or a widow or widower. It's the quality of the close relationships that matters. It turns out that living in the midst of conflict is really bad for you. High conflict marriages, for example, without much affection, turn out to be as bad for our health, perhaps worse than getting divorced. And living in the midst of good, warm relationships are protective. Once they followed the men all the way back into their 80s, they wanted to look at them at midlife to see if they were able to predict who was going to grow into a happy and healthy octogenarian and who wasn't. And when they gathered together everything we knew about them at age 50, it wasn't their middle-age cholesterol. It was how satisfied they were with their relationships. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships in their 50s were the healthiest at age 80. And good, close relationships seem to buffer us from some of the slings and arrows of getting old. Our most happily partnered men and women reported in their 80s that on the days when they had the most physical pain, their mood stayed just about as happy. But the people who were in unhappy relationships, on the days when they reported their physical pain being the highest, it was magnified even more with the emotional pain. The third big lesson that they learned was that our relationships don't just protect our bodies, they protect our brains. It turns out that being in a secure friendship or relationship with another person when you're in your 80s is protective, and that the people who are in relationships where they feel that they can count on another person stay mentally sharp longer. And the people in relationships where they feel they can't really count on the people other than themselves experience memory decline at a greater rate. Those who have good relationships don't have to be smooth all the time. Some of our octogenarian couples would bicker with each other all day long, but as long as they felt that they could really count on the other when the things got going really tough, those arguments didn't take a toll on their memory ability. So the message that good, close relationships are good for our health and well-being, this is the wisdom that's as old as the hills. So why is this so hard to get and it's so easy to ignore? It's because we're human. We'd like to think there's some other quick fix, something that we can get on that'll make our lives really good and keep them that way. Relationships are messy and they're complicated, and it takes hard work tending to family and friends. It's not sexy and it's not glamorous. It's also lifelong. It never ends. The people in the 75-year study who are the happiest in retirement were the people who have actively worked to replace the workmates with new playmates and replace the people who have passed on with other people. And that's something that I talk about with my colleagues about diversifying our social portfolio. So just as we don't want to put all our money in one place, we don't want to put all of our relationship capital in one place. Because as I'm learning with my beautiful mom, she's age 91, and it feels to me like every week her friends are passing away. And it is, it's tough. And she feels not only their loss, but like how to replace in some ways those people with people that she feels that she can share and count on. So having people of different ages, reaching out to your grandchildren or to your neighbors. I used to, in Laguna Niguel, live next door to a woman in her late 80s. And I've had 3 kids, but at the time I had 2 little babies, and I remember just wishing she would come over here to my house and help me because I was trying to make dinner and they were both wanting to be held. And I look back on that and think, if she knew, if I had articulated to her how much it would have meant for me to come and sit in my house and do nothing with me except hold these kids, I think she would have been flattered. And I think that my life would have been better, but I didn't know to reach out because I was young and dumb and 30. And she didn't know to reach out because our society has this multi-billion-dollar anti-aging campaign brainwashing us that we're less than, or that people wouldn't want to just hang out with us. But it's so very not true. And I think that between young people having the realization and older people having the realization, it's more likely that we, older people, need to be doing the reaching out to form these relationships of people with different ages. Okay, I went off script there a little bit. Okay. Just like the millennials in a recent survey, many of the men started out as young adults thinking that what they needed for a happy, long, great life was fame and wealth. But over and over, the 75 years, the study showed that the people who fared the best were the people who leaned into relationships rather than leaning into work. So what about you? Let's say right now you're 65. What might leaning into a relationship look like for you? You're 75. You're 98. What does it look like to lean into a relationship? The possibilities are practically endless. It might be something as simple as replacing some of your screen time with human face-to-face time. It may be asking somebody to go for a walk with you. If you're one that doesn't walk, it might be bold enough to say, could you come over and we'll look over a scrapbook of pictures? Will you come over because there's a new Netflix show that we can watch together and talk about? Could you come over because I have some new funny jokes I want to share? It's all too common to let family feuds or little feuds with friends get in the way of that. And I have an example. I have a friend who we were very close, a girlfriend, and we lived on the same street, And then when we moved just down the street in Dana Point, we don't see each other as often. And the not seeing each other as often has made it a little bit weird when we do see each other. And it's like, I need to take my own advice and say, hey, we don't see each other anymore. Let's get together. Like, not just let those little weirdnesses get in our way. There's a quote from Mark Twain that was over a century ago, and he was looking back on his life, and he wrote, "There isn't time, so brief is life, for bickerings, apologies, heartburnings, callings to account. There is only time for loving, and but an instant, so to speak, for that." So like really just going ahead and thinking, whether I have great, close, firm, affirmative social relationships, or whether, I've let some go in some different areas, of course, we can today make a move and create greater happiness and longevity and cognitive abilities in mending those if we are proactive. And so if somebody that you would like to see but that you don't, proactively reach out to your kids and grandkids and neighbors. So I knew that this was a long lecture, so I thought I'm going to start with a blah blah talking, and then I'm going to turn to the slides. So now you have earned the visual part as well. Whoops. Okay. Okay, now I don't have any notes. It's just my mental ability. So we'll see. At UCI, my colleague Claudia Kawas runs the 90+ study. How wonderful! A study of just people 90 and better. And it's something, if you wanted to look into, you could type in 90+ study, and it's kind of amazing that it's right here in our backyard at UCI. But what she found really echoed the findings of the Harvard study. It was that close relationships cause better aging largely through meaning. It also had the side benefit to say that it was good to eat, drink, and be merry. So it was one of those wonderful studies that give you the thumbs up on drinking in moderation and eating some chocolate. So I recommend this study for those like me who like that. So what I want to get into now is my research and other people's research on why it would be the case that physically, mentally, we are benefited by human relationships. So I want to start inside of your brain. There's a place inside there called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. Cool people call it DAC. So I'm going to show you, if you took a cross section between where the red slide is and the green slide, in that center there is where you will find the DAC. If you stimulate that area, what happens is you lose interest, you lose initiative, you feel disagreeable, angry, and hyper-focused on things. So pain stimulates the DAC in our brain. So the example I'll give you is that when I was having all three of those kids, it was a little bit tough there before the blessed epidural came, and it was hurting, and I was like, stop reading that book to me that you're trying to do. Back away from my bed. I was hyper-focused, I was disagreeable, I was angry. You could just ask my husband, I was all of these. So that's when pain stimulates that part of the brain. Okay, guess what? Guess what also is shown to be stimulated? And you also lose energy. Oh, that's weird. Okay, so when you are having chronic isolation, your brain is stimulated in that same area. So some of these things that we just attribute to aging are in fact as a result of wishing that we had more social interaction than we currently had. And this is, of course, it's different for everyone. There are some people who truly feel fulfilled and great with a very small circle, and there's some people, like my best friend, she literally feels like she has 30 really close girlfriends, and I have maybe 4 really close girlfriends, and we just have sort of different numbers of what we can handle. So now I also want to tell you another thing about what is so problematic about isolation. And I want to introduce you to someone who had a really big impact on my life. And in fact, about 6 years ago, he was here with me on this stage commemorating World Elder Abuse Awareness Day through an organization I was a part of Ageless Alliance. So his name is Harry, and he not only allowed me to share his story, but he encouraged me to share his story. So this was Harry on the day that I met him. He was in the hospital as a result of dehydration and malnutrition. But like so many things, if you peel back the skin of the onion, what led to the dehydration and the malnutrition? Then I also, that's just weird. Oh, I probably did that. There you go. This is Harry. He went to Stanford University. He was a Green Beret. He grew up in Hawaii, where he used to longboard surf. He was married for almost 60 years. He walked with his wife during her path of Alzheimer's disease. And upon her passing, he lived alone in his nice house in Mission Viejo. And his only adult daughter, they were estranged because his wife hadn't been accepting of her homosexuality. And so she said, forget it, kind of to her parents, if you can't accept my life, I'm going to move away. And she lived in Florida. So he was really on his own. And after he was so busy caring for his wife, then what happened was he then became vulnerable. And that's another thing that happens with isolation. So this is a picture that I actually took with my cell phone, and it was Harry in the process of being scammed by telephone solicitors. And so has anyone here had anyone call them about the grandparent scam? And yes, look at all those people. It happened to my mom when I was over there too. And for those who haven't had it yet, what happens is you'll pick up your phone and they'll say, Grandpa? And you'll say, oh, hi, Courtney, how are you? Okay, now they have Courtney. And then they're talking back and forth, and before they know it, they'll say, oh, Grandpa, there's been a problem. Don't tell my mom and dad, because they'll be so mad, but I'm in big trouble, and I need you to wire some money so that I can, there's all different variations of it. And it happens all the time. And then when people do fall for it, they feel embarrassed that they fell for it, which in fact, the embarrassment and the shame is only on the perpetrators. These people who, in the course of a year, it's $37 billion industry about scamming seniors each year. And it isn't because seniors are stupid, and it isn't because they have cognitive impairment. It's because the scammers have coordinated a whole business plan in terms of tricking us. They say that they're from the IRS. I got one of those. And my first reaction was like, oh no, did I not pay my IRS tax bill? I can see how. So they're good at what they do. So it happened to Harry. So Harry, he was a great philanthropist. And so they got that from him and then would use that. So they'd say, we really need some funds to help support these orphan boys and all this. And so in a number of different ways, including caregivers who bilked him out of money, he lost over $600,000. And as a result of that, Harry lost his home in Mission Viejo. And what I want you to know is that Harry was not cognitively impaired. Harry was he was brilliant. He was smarter than I am. So this is not something that happens just to other people. This is something that could happen to any of us and does happen to any of us. So in Harry's case, we did have to go through. So I met him with my work at the Elder Abuse Forensic Center. He did lose his home, and so often is the case that we can't get the money back because it's just hidden in these phone centers, maybe oftentimes out of the United States. So he moved into a board and care facility in San Clemente, and it wasn't nice, but it was like to look at, but it was very loving, and he was able to live out the rest of his life in a great way. And so this is going to make you happy because this picture was after the first picture. Yes. So that's Harry in our backyard with my next door neighbor's baby on his lap, my dog in the background. And the remedy was social connection. And the remedy was having access through his electronics to people who he could trust, but not to people who would do him harm. As a side note, there is also a part of the brain that is different from the DAC. It's the ventromedial prefrontal cortex that has to do with gullibility and credibility, and sometimes imperceptible changes in that area can make you more likely to think that something is accurate when it is not. So you can be perfectly cognitively intact, but things seem more plausible as a result. So again, a warning to make sure you surround yourself with people that will tell you, like, hey, no, you didn't win the Jamaican lottery. So that's my favorite picture of Harry. Okay. Oh, and one other thing about this with his red jacket was we invited him over for dinner, and it was one of those really hot summer days. And so I had some horrible T-shirt and shorts, and my husband had some probably equally awful outfit on, and our kids were a mess. And we had a window that when there was a knock on the door, you could see out over to see the person. And I saw, and Harry was wearing it beautiful. I mean, he just looked so nice with a tie, and he had white pants and a white shirt and white cowboy boots. And so before I answered the door, I was like, everyone, change clothes. Put on a dress and a collared shirt. And so we did. Okay, so this is something that I have recently come up because I'm a really big fan of acronyms. And so when I was thinking about how can we safeguard ourselves in order to maximize our happy, healthy life, I'm not going to be talking about diet. I'm not going to be talking about exercise. I'm not going to be talking about all the usual stuff. You already know that. I'm talking about different stuff because you and I are going to for sure grow old and die. Like, there's no amount of Sudoku and wheatgrass and jogging that is going to prevent that. Like, it's okay. It's all right. We want to do the best we can, but you know what? We're going to get older, and what a great thing that is. So this new acronym, I'm just trying this out on you. I am going to talk about it in this order because my thought is that maybe you could, like, a lot of times I'll go to church or I'll go to a lecture and I'm like, oh yeah, that was, and then I leave and they'll like, tell me about it. I'm like, nothing. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the take home is. So my hope for you is that maybe you would memorize these letters and that these would be action steps. So there will be a quiz about what the G stands for. So the G that we're going to talk about now is give. I'm going to start with a story. I had a wonderful colleague who passed away, and he was at Harvard, not related to the study, and he would pick up his parents once a week when they would take the subway, and they were in their 90s, and this was before the ubiquitous cell phone era. So his very frail parents would come in. It was a time when it was just dumping snow in the back east, and he would, after work, come in his car. They would step off the subway and into his car, and he would drive to their house because he's a good son. One day, he was not such a good son. He got late at work, and his parents get off, and it is just dumping snow, and their son's nowhere to be found, and they don't have a phone. So this is the thing about our aging brains that no one talks about. There is better creative problem solving as you get older than in any other part of life. So we're so worried about the fact that we can't remember someone's name or that name of that TV show that we're forgetting that what we possess in our 70s, 80s, 90s, and 100 is the greatest thing, and that is creative problem solving. So what this couple did was they looked over and they saw a pizza place, and they carefully walked through the snow to the pizza place, and they said, "We'd like to have a pizza delivered to this address. And when you deliver it, we'd like to ride along in the car with you." And that, my friends, is aging. And aging enables me to give. But this giving requires you to shun, to run from the anti-aging mentality. So, since the minute you were born, every magazine, every card at the car wash, every TV show, every joke has told you that it is ugly and bad and silly and stupid to get old. And it is simply not the case. Because what you possess is the creative problem solving, the resilience, the humility, the recognition of what is and is not important, the experience that and we all know this, but we sometimes grow timid because we can't do our dumb phone app as fast as the grandkids, or, we're not so sure about this band or that band these days. But if you remind yourself that what you have to give is the most valuable thing on this earth, and can you imagine our nation if we listened to and used and employed and drew upon the wisdom and creative problem solving of older adults? So in order for you to live and age brilliantly and to stay socially connected, you need to start with thinking that you have a responsibility to give. And that giving can be this problem solving. It can be in listening. One of the greatest mentors I have is largely nonverbal as a result of a stroke. But the listening that this friend gives me in truly allowing me to be heard is priceless to me. And if she undervalued herself, she would think, I'm no longer able to speak, I can't give back, then I would have missed out on that. You can give your time, and you guys already, I know, do that. You can give your reaching out to people who maybe aren't so easy to be around. My mom now has my mom's widow friends are her life support, and I'm so grateful. So our family, we love her so much, but she gets together all the time with her friends, and she has a few friends that she complains about to me. So she'll say like, "Oh, so-and-so is hard of hearing, and it just throws off our whole bridge," and blah, 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 And so we did stop the other day, and I thought, you including her and being patient and kind about that's everything, And so ever since she kind of reframed her mind, she is seeking that friend out as opposed to, complaining about it. So to age brilliantly, to keep your mind sharp, to keep your body going, think about, what am I giving? And don't let yourselves have any excuses for not giving. You have arthritis and you can't walk? So what? There's a million other things you can do to give. You have macular degeneration and you can't see? So what? There's a lot for you to give. My retina's detached 2 years ago, and so I lost full sight in one eye and I lost 80% sight in the other eye because it was a double detachment. And I got a taste of wow, I did not feel great about myself, because I would be in a conversation with people and I couldn't even tell if I was putting my face in the right direction in order to carry on a conversation. Or I'd be talking and I couldn't see their face, and so I'd think, do they think this is funny? Are they bored with what I'm saying? And it was really an eye-opener of easier said than done. So I had to take a really, really strong talking to myself to say, hey, you're still you. You can't see, but you can laugh about it and you can tell people, I don't even know where to put my face. Could you tell me what your face is doing right now so I can see if we're on the right track? Or could you take my arm because I'm scared right now because I'm scared I'm going to fall? So anyway, no excuses. So that's not that. Okay. So the next one is receive. Oh, this one's harder than the first one. To receive is hard for Americans because we like being the givers. I'm the school volunteer. I'm the strong guy who moves stuff. I'm the giver. But the thing of it is, as we get older, we also have to learn an equally important role, to be the receiver. There is a beautiful book that I wish I had under each of your chairs. If I was Oprah, I would. And it's called The Dilemmas of Dependency. And Wendy Lustbader wrote it. And it talks about how hard it is to get used to being a gracious receiver when we had never been one to have to receive things. But think about it. Think about how good you felt sometime when you were able to really help somebody. Maybe it was your aging parent, maybe it was your child, maybe it was your neighbor, but you think back of like, wow, I felt so good to give. And think that by you being a gracious and accepting receiver, you're giving somebody else that gift. So when somebody says, could I bring you groceries by? Because I'm going to Trader Joe's and I'd love to pick you something up. Your first reaction, no, I got it. I don't need anything because I got it, because I'm strong. I'm a stud. I do everything for myself perfectly. What about this? Wow, you're going to Trader Joe's? Thank you. I'd love to get one of those little individual salads. It's right when you walk into the right. No, it's okay, because just like I promise you you're going to die, I promise you that the odds are very much in favor that you're going to need some help, whether it's when you're 100 or whether it's today. And that's not a bad thing. That is not weakness. That is not selfishness. And it's not being a burden. So what is the difference between being a burden? Our whole great collective fear is that we don't want to be a burden on our kids and grandkids. I know, but a burden is somebody who's just asking for more and more and more and more, and that's not enough, and da-da-da. But accepting offers, that's learning how to be a good receiver. And if you need some help with it, again, another talking to of yourself, or maybe read that book, Dilemmas of Dependency. Okay, so quiz. Shut your eyes. What does the G stand for? Give. Awesome. Okay, R? Okay, easiest test ever because it's right here. Okay, those who are very clever will see on the previous slide I had the A as attitude. But then last night I thought I'm going to change it, but I didn't change it on that slide. So the real A is adjust. Okay, so we got give, we got receive, and this one, adjust. How many of you are adjusting right now? Right? I didn't used to have to walk like that. I didn't used to think that putting my darn shoes on was so hard. In fact, right now, I just remembered, I have 4 buttons on my shirt that are unbuttoned under my jacket. So if I have a hot flash, I'm in trouble. Because I was sore, and I couldn't button them. So there's going to be adjustments, right? You maybe were a guy who could always lift things that heavy, and now you can't. You maybe have a person who is such a good driver, and now you can't drive. Maybe you're a person who is so attractive that everyone used to give you all these looks, and now they're not. It takes some adjustment, but that is aging, and that is the process. And for those things that get harder and weaker, and the fact that we have to get up all these times to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, there are other things. There are other things like humility that, you know what, I'm going to adjust. I no longer can get to Costco and just kill it but now it's so big and far, I'm not going to do that anymore. But yeah, that's an adjustment. I'm going to do it a different way. My mom recently made an adjustment, and that is she's super frugal, even though she is pretty affluent. So she is a person who will drive all over the world to get berries on sale. And then she calls us all and tells us where the berries can be found. And so she's had a lot of pretty horrible health conditions recently, and she's still driving, but she recently told me that she was going to go to Marbella Market, which is across the street from her house. And she used to tell me, never go there because it's expensive. She's going to Marbella Market. It's an adjustment. She doesn't love it. She doesn't like spending that much on berries, but she's doing it because it's going to be something that's going to enable her to keep doing what she wants. So, you got the A of adjustment? There's a million examples, and if I had more time, I'd have you write it down. And where can you find adjustments that need to be made? Things that bug you and make you mad. Things that feel like they're clipping your wings. Those are things that you're going to think, how can I do something else about it? I can't hear, and because I can't hear, I can't go to cocktail parties because it's simply not fun anymore, and I used to love to go to cocktail parties. Well, maybe there's a different, smaller social setting that you could go to where you can still get the cocktail. Whoops. Oh yeah. Got it. Okay. So this one is new. Okay. Give, receive, adjust. Now, I know new doesn't really go with it because it's not a verb, and last night I tried very hard to think of it, but I can't. So I just called it new. I also called it novel, but I went back to new this morning. So new. It is comfortable. It is nice to do things the way that we're used to doing things, because we've always done it like that. That's how it works. It's okay. But what if we also think, what are some new things that we can do? What if I did this a little bit differently? What if maybe I'm bored, maybe I'm not bored. Either way, it's good neurologically to do things differently and to do some new. And when we think of new, we can't help but think about these little ubiquitous boxes that our humans are tied to. So I wanted to take a minute and talk about that, because after I left USC, then I did the nonprofit, and then I have recently, a partner and I have started a tech company. And what I'm not going to be doing is any kind of commercial for it, but I am going to be talking about something that I learned in doing it. And that is technology in older adults. Okay, so let's talk about traditional research. Traditional research shows us that you can read yourself, but that 78% of folks have a cell phone, 32% have a tablet, half have a desktop, almost 60% use the internet. And so it's really touted in all the newspapers and lay publications about how basically here we go. I love your body language, because everyone was doing the same thing. So about half of us use Facebook. Here's the rub. What I found was I work primarily with people who are 75 and older. Most of my friends are 80 and older. I have a colleague that has a paid job with me who's 105. So the people that I work with, I did not see these same numbers. And I was wondering. So I dug into it. And what they did is they were all a telephone survey. And the telephone survey called people. And so if you were older and couldn't answer the phone, or if you were hard of hearing and couldn't answer the phone, then you were excluded from the study. And so I looked at what their ages were. It was highly, highly oversampled between 65 and 74. And so that's just where life gets interesting, starting at 75 and above. So I did a study that did an in-depth look at technology use among older adults. And this time, instead of a 2-minute phone call asking these questions. We went into the homes of older adults across the country and really dug into technology because we know it's here to stay, all the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. Well, that seems like too much information. There. Okay. Oh yeah, this is what I just said. See? There. I said it. So I called it, What is Technology Like in Real Life? We looked at 56 people we started at 75 and the oldest happened to be 94. We did it in people's homes for a duration of an hour or two in 6 states, in urban, suburban, rural areas. And not only did we say, do you use a smartphone? We also said, great, may I take a look? There's the states. Here's what we found. So in traditional studies, it showed us that 81% of people are using a smartphone. But in our sample, only 53% were using a smartphone. And it would happen, I remember one that I did, I said, do you use a smartphone? And I didn't hold it up, I just said that. And the person said, yes, I do. And I said, terrific, may I see it? And then totally understandably, they got a wireless landline and then brought it over. Right? That's smart. It doesn't have a wire connecting it. That's a smartphone. So you wonder how many times people weren't necessarily responding to what they thought they were responding. Similarly with Wi-Fi, we had somebody also understood it to be hi-fi, like high fidelity. And, you know, lower on tablets or computers, email. So here's the interesting thing. So in these studies, they assumed that if you had the technology, you were then sharing photos, you were doing video calls, you were doing music, you were having all kinds of fun with it for the money you were paying. So they didn't even ask the question. So we, in people's homes, asked the question, are you able to easily share photos with your loved ones? Because that's fun. Only 18% of our sample of those who had technology were able to easily share photos. Even more surprisingly, only 5% of people were easily able to press a button and conduct a successful video call. And only 7% could easily access digital music that they wanted to listen to. So if you turn those numbers around, it's like, wow, 95% of people are missing out on what can be pretty great video calls, digital music. I also asked, because of my elder abuse interests, how many of you have been solicited by a scammer over the telephone or computer? And a whopping 87% of people had. 86% of people said that they were frustrated with technology. And half of them didn't have access to internet, email, computer, or tablet. So it just struck me that as much as we are all about technology, I think a lot of times the reality is different. And so we published a paper on it. And look at that. So now I get to introduce you to Anna. In this photo, she's 114 years old. Talk about aging brilliantly. She was telling us about, so this is my partner at work, whose name is Scott, and he used to be the chief information officer at Bank of America. And so in the 90s, he implemented online banking. And I remember in the 90s thinking, this is the worst idea. This would never work because everybody's going to get their money all lost and confused and stolen on using online banking. Well, happily, I didn't know him then, and he didn't listen to me. And of course, now online banking seems so normal to my teenagers that they don't even know where the stamp goes on an envelope. And I think that's a bad job of parenting, frankly. But what we learned from Anna, she was perfectly cognitively sharp and lived on her own. Hello, 114-year-old awesomeness. She was the 7th oldest person in the world at this time. She has passed away. But what we learned from Anna was that starting in her 90s her fingers grew increasingly dry. Well, on our monitors, on our tablets and our cell phones, when you touch it, it's the moisture that activates it touching. So that's why sometimes your grandkids will say, just press here, Grandma, just press here. And you're like, I am pressing here. But our drier fingers. So we then needed to find a screen that is highly sensitive, that you can be 114 and it can work. Similarly, we listened deeply, and she said, I don't want to deal with passwords. It makes me frustrated and mad, and I spend too much of my life with that. So could we find a way to make it secure without passwords? Could we find a way to, instead of an on and off button, you just have a cover that when you open the cover, it's on? Could we have it so that you could just set it on a charger and there's nothing to plug in? So in some ways, that's a different lecture, but what we created was GrandPad, and that's a picture of it. Again, not sales. I don't care if you buy it, but they, if you wanted to, they do sell them at Target or online. And on the other end, family members use their existing device. So like with my mom, I can press a button and we're video calling, and then like what I did today is I took a picture from the back and then was able to press a button and it automatically goes to her GrandPad. So if you're thinking, I don't need this, I love my Apple phone and I love my tablet, awesome, good. You should use the existing technology that should work for you. But what I'm saying is that I deeply believe that as we move forward, that we need to create devices that were designed by, with, and for older adults so that they work. I don't believe that the font should be tiny. I don't believe that my mom's fingers are all at right angles and mine are going that way too. And so she has to kind of sneak up on it, whereas, to have big buttons is helpful. So what I want to encourage you as you are seeking opportunities to give, to receive, to adjust, that you would also think about the new of, are my devices working for me? Like, is my landline good or is it full of scammers? Is my phone good enough so that I can make a video call with somebody? Or if I'm like, if you're hard of hearing, video calls are terrific because you can read lips. And then what we also added was real time, that we can type the words in. So my patients who are really hard of hearing, we can communicate while we're seeing each other. So it doesn't have to be GrandPad. It doesn't have to be any certain solution, except the point is that we are now 10,000 of us every day are turning 75. 10,000 of us. And what this means is we can demand of saying, I'm not going to put up with these things that don't work. We need to have aisles that are wide enough for a walker. We need to have things that aren't up a million stairs all the time. I need something that I can see and that font isn't so small. So try something new, a new way of doing it, and don't let yourself go, like, I'm not a technology person. I can't do it. I'll break it. I don't like it. No. We all feel that way. You can do it. You're not going to break it. And so what if you do? Okay, now here's the weirdest one of all. Like, what? Age brilliantly? And then the last one is dementia? Kerry, that you were up too late. No, I did this on purpose. I wanted to get on my soapbox about dementia. There's a book that I am crazy about that I would love for you guys if you are interested. It's called Dementia Reconsidered. I didn't write it, and the man who wrote it, sadly, he wrote it in 1998 and 21 years ago, and he then passed away suddenly, unexpectedly right after. And because of that, it sort of languished a little because he had passed away. But some wonderful colleagues got together and kind of resurrected the book. And so right now, if you buy the most recent edition, it's called Dementia Reconsidered, something still comes first. the person still comes first. That after every chapter, which are so good, another dementia expert writes a chapter about that, saying, oh yeah, this really still rings true and this and that. And so in a nutshell, what I want you guys to do in your journey of aging brilliantly is to reconsider dementia. Because my sense that right now what we all do is go, as long as I have my mind, it's going to be okay. But if I'm not as sharp as I once was, it's just going to be terrible. If I would get a dementia diagnosis, it's all over for me. I might as well just die. And the thing is, if we live long enough, half of us will have some kind of dementia or cognitive impairment. Half of us. And so if we understand that we get it, we're not our outside, but I would argue we're not also just our brain. And I go to a lot of funerals. That's another thing about being a gerontologist. And I love it, actually, because you hear people, it's not their resume characteristics. It's not like, oh, I was a professor and I had this job and I drove this kind of car. No, nobody cares about that. People go, God, this person really listened deeply to me. This person was so funny. He had a joke every day. This person, when I was down in the dumps, was there for me. It's your obituary characteristics. So, with dementia, even if you or your spouse should have changes in cognition, if you should be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, if you have a stroke and have some changes, or Parkinson's or Huntington's, or a lot of these other things that can cause changes, if you think about all that you have to offer beyond just your perfectly sharp brain, then you can still value yourself. And so those of you who are living with or love someone with dementia, it's the most important. Okay, so there's a disease process, and that would be a whole other lecture about what happens, the neurofibrillary plaques and tangles in your brain. But there's this other wing that book talks about that I so agree with because I see it. It's a malignant social psychology that accompanies dementia. So what happens is people notice changes in you. You repeat your story. You can't find where you parked. You're having some of these changes. And then people start acting really weird about you. Like, and then you take that on like, oh no, I don't want to be a burden. I'm so embarrassed. I have dementia. Oh, dementia. Well, and then people treat you so weird that you start acting weirder and having a harder time because you're so worried about it. So if you calm yourself down and say, I'm still me, and I might do things that are different, and I might even get all the way full-blown Alzheimer's disease, but like the love and the kindness and all that has accumulated me as a person is still there. And if we can see that in other people. So when I work with adults with dementia, I really make sure that I'm focusing on the person, not the caregiver, not the adult daughter. And I have adult children say to me, oh, she's not here. When she's sitting right here. She is most certainly here, more here now than ever. So that's when I know I really need to take that adult daughter aside and say, she is most certainly here. And changes in your mind are physiological and don't mean that you're not here. So that's something to be thinking about and reading about, and maybe not completely just vilifying it. Do I want to find a cure? So badly. Is it devastating? It is. But does it make it any better for us to just like make the D word the worst thing in the world? It's not. It's not good for patients who have it, and many, many of us will have it. And a lot of people I love have dementia and are so wonderful, I kind of think, how it used to be with people with Down syndrome. People would say like disparaging things of like retard. I think what's going to happen if we're successful going forward is the way that we act about, oh, they're demented, or like, I think I have dementia, or like senile. I think we're going to look and think, oh my goodness, we used to say such awful things. We used to treat people with brain changes so differently and in a way that made their lives so much worse. So let's see where we are. I think we're getting close to, we're getting close to the end. Don't do it like that. Okay, I don't have any bond to this movie except I love it, and you can get it for free. It won the Sundance Film Festival, and if on your computer or on your grandpad, you can just type in Alive Inside, and it talks about the benefits of music for neurological stimulation with dementia. And it's been so wonderful for me to see. So it's not just any music. It's not like I'll hear people say, it's just music and dementia. No, it's a reason for it, and that is emotionally salient memories are stored in a different part of the brain. Music that is emotionally salient, music that you danced to at your wedding, music that your mom used to sing to you, music that you sang in church, goes to a different area, and because of that, it is maintained. So I now am working with a person who is in the absolute farthest stages of Alzheimer's disease. She lives in Garden Grove. She is contracted. She is nonverbal. And yet, I found out from her daughter that she used to sing in her choir back in the Deep South. And so we found some hymns that they played at that church. And she then, when we play the music, sings the words. And it is the most beautiful. It feels so good for her. And then because of that stimulation, there can be a halo effect afterwards. So the last time I was there, she kept repeating the word lovely. Like she said it probably 30 times after it was over. And you know, tears are streaming down all our face, and particularly her adult daughter. Like, you know, you hadn't heard your mom's voice, and then to hear her singing a song. So that's what this movie is about, and my colleague is featured on it, and they talk about why it is. But if you are, either you are in the early stages of dementia, or you have a loved one or a friend, this can be a great and positive way to not vilify something that happens to many of us. So I'm a little touch early than the 11 o'clock time, because my thought is that I always like it the most when we get to like talk about what you guys want to talk about. So my thought is that maybe if you have questions, you can be thinking about them. I also know that this goes for a while, but that there is a bus that picks some people up at 11. So, you know, that's good for that as well. So is that okay if we like turn it to questions? Okay. Laura's my boss. Okay, so what's happened now is we're getting some mics. Everything you wanted to know about aging, but we're afraid to ask. Already have somebody, so probably somebody is going to bring a microphone there. Yes, it's happening. Sorry, surprise, we're doing it early. Okay, while I'm waiting, guess what's happening today? Okay, I've been married for 25 years, and all that time, we never felt like it was the right time to get a puppy. Like, today is the day. So right after this, I go and pick up my husband in Newport. We drive to Clovis, which is very far, Fresno, and it is an English cream golden retriever. Oh, I'm so excited. So my house, like I have this pen and the crate that it will go in there and a blanket, and there's a stuffed animal that has a heartbeat, so it will feel like it's with its mom. So excited. I think it's kind of sad that I was able to have kids but not a puppy until today. Okay, so we have the first question. Excellent point. So everybody here, what was the end of the story with Edna and Charlotte? So as a reminder, Charlotte, lovely, saved those things for me to color on, lived in Laguna Woods. Just remembered. Edna, so this is what happened. That's good. I'm going to always add that to the lectures, and I'll show their pictures. She lived till her passing of a stroke in Laguna Woods, and just continued to be a person that we all were so grateful to be around. And then Edna needed to go into a nursing home and continued to be a person that we didn't care for to be around, but we still visited. And she then did get dementia. And the one good thing is that she was convinced that she was the owner of the building. And it was good for her because she'd be like, I own this whole place, you know. And so, yeah, that's what happened. So it kind of goes with what I was saying. Okay, I can't see you, but I'll be able to hear you. And I can't hear you either.
You were talking about technology and how it's benefiting aging. One of the things that's I see becoming ubiquitous are all these little talking boxes that we have in our home. And I'm wondering how that relates to this whole idea of having assistance or help in this process of graciously aging.
I love that question. So the question was, what about these boxes in our house, Alexa, and all these devices that you can just use your voice? I think that it's the Wild West right now. I think we are putting things in our home. I think, they're kind of listening to us, kind of spying on us, kind of great because you can, say, Alexa, play this song. So I think there's hope with them, but I also think we need to be pretty darn careful. The example I'll give you is that my husband and I just bought the Ring, where you put it on your doorbell, and when somebody rings the doorbell, it goes to my phone. And cool, creepy, it's like, I accidentally saw one of my kids kissing on the front porch. I didn't mean to see that. So on a serious note, though, what should we do as aging consumers with these things? And so, again, I would encourage you, if you are interested and you think, new, I'm going to try something new, you could try these things and then decide for yourself, is this cool and helpful, worth the potential privacy issues? I think this privacy convenience, and I think Facebook has not done a good job in protecting our privacy. So I think it's also important to be aware of the company and their policies. So, for example, with what we're doing, we were trying to be so very careful, no commercials, no ads, never sell any data, to try to, what would it look like if you were all the way on the end of erring on the side of privacy. But I love your question, and I do think, gosh, if I am ever paralyzed, I'm sure going to want to say, hey, Alexa, check my email and read it to me. That does appeal to me. So I'm so glad you brought that question. Okay, so here's another question.
Okay, so you were talking about the Harvard Health Study for men. How about women? What studies have been done on women? Are there any differences in aging?
I love that. So the question is we're talking about the Harvard Health Study of men. What about women? So luckily, Harvard added women. So the findings, and I probably didn't highlight that enough, is that findings were similar between men and women. And that is that women who had more meaningful connections and who were able to, sort of diversify their friendships as they went through life, had better outcomes, even holding constant education and health factors and parts of the country. Because what they've done is they've added on the children and even grandchildren. So it's now no longer just in Boston, because those people have spread all over. So that's why now it's a national study and includes children. Great question. Next question.
I'm interested in knowing what you feel about our government that never approaches aging in any shape, or form that I am aware of. It's not open for discussion. It doesn't seem to be out there.
Yes, and I want to make sure I understand the question. So, do you mean that society doesn't talk about aging, or that our government doesn't talk about aging?
Our government.
Our government. So, do other people find that, because like when I think of it, and it could be a gerontologist misperception, but like I, for example, worked at the House of Representatives Committee on Aging, and I worked a lot with the National Institute on Aging. So like my perception is that we have been trying to do a lot about aging, but I think what I'm hearing is that despite the fact that we're putting money into it and that a lot of people are working on it, it doesn't seem like it's then getting out to the community so that people who are aging aren't benefiting from what the government's trying to put into aging. Does that seem right? I think, yeah, we can do a better job, and I think maybe a brainstorm of how we could get that information out in a better way. So, there are sources that I follow. There's AARP, and I'm, I have a love-hate with AARP. I think sometimes I really get, and I really shouldn't be necessarily saying that out loud because I'll probably be killed, but I think there's a lot of great things there. In fact, they're doing some really wonderful loneliness research, and they get that information out. I think sometimes there is a bias because they bring in so much money. I follow Straya and Next Avenue, and these are sources of information and what's new. And for example, Next Avenue did a thing about what ageism looks like now and what we can be doing about it. So my perception is if you look, it's out there, but that we could do a better job getting it out there. And I'd love to see more on TV. I would love us to be talking about it, but anytime that TV has reached out to me, they have such an old view of aging. They'll go, could you come on and talk about urinary incontinence? It's like, yeah, but there's a lot more interesting topics that we need to have, that don't make it them, right? I think that could be the message, is that there's no us and them. It's just humans. And I happen to be 50 right now, and pretty soon I'm going to be 80, and then I was 2. But we do something because of the fear of society that we make it them. And if there was a way, or a talk show, I'd love that. Okay, next question. Thanks for your question.
Yes, good morning. I'm a sociologist that wrote my master's thesis on growing old in Scandinavia, and I have traveled rather extensively, and I have a cross-cultural question. I've noticed that becoming old in other cultures, they have very often different attitudes, different values. They don't use our technology, and they're quite happy doing what they're doing. And quite frankly, I think the way we are aging in America is not the right way. I think I speak for many people here that I'm used to reading newspapers and books and magazines, and I hate these blueberry, raspberry, blackberry gadgets that everyone is hitting, and I'm perfectly happy surviving the way I've survived for the last X number of years. Is that wrong?
Yes, that is very normal, and I think you speak for so many people. And I, too, love to read the newspaper, like the real get my fingers dirty newspaper every single morning, and my husband reads every bit of it and remembers all of it. So I really hear what you're saying. And then also from a cross-cultural point of view, in Scandinavia, I really admire what they're doing in a lot of countries. For example, our daughter studied abroad last year in Italy, and in each of the piazzas, people were sitting out together in the evenings for no reason, listening to music and eating and laughing. And I stood there and thought, here we are in our houses all separated, and what other good models we could have. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned, and sometimes I do feel sorry the way that America does it. But I also think that while there's nothing wrong to do things the way that you do them and to prefer to do things the way you've always done them, I think it also, intellectual curiosity is such that it can be good to also look into other things. And then, for example, for my mom, she's getting pictures from my daughter who's at USC in practically real time. And so I think that part of it is kind of neat for her. So I love your point, and I think you speak for a lot of people. One more question.
Okay, so my mother's having trouble when she presses the things on the phone, and I think it's the giraffe fingers. What, do you have an idea that to help her press it?
Yes, so her question was a good one, and she had a beautiful accent, and that's why you couldn't understand her. And she said that her mother is having maybe the dry finger situation where she's having trouble pressing things on her phone. Do I have any ideas for her? And so, again, I'm like so careful not to try to sell anything. So I can tell you that I know of one thing because I helped make it called GrandPad, and it's a phone and a tablet, so it might work for her. And you can either dial the number or it's also programmed. So for my mom, oh, she's got a phone. She wants to use that phone that she has. What could she do to press it? She could try, having a little moisture. I've seen people take a sponge, hit the sponge, and then use that, not too much. That'd be an idea.
And we have time for one last quick question.
One more.
Okay, a plug for Alexa. I lost my phone, and I panicked. And I remembered that my daughter had an Alexa. And I said to Alexa, call Laura. And it did, and she took me to buy a new phone. So
I love that.
Then I bought another Alexa to have in my bathroom in case I fall in the bathroom.
Yes, I love that. And that is, there is technology for good, and there's just going to be more and more. So, my mom wears something around her neck, so if she falls, she can press it. And so she took it off to do some gardening, and sure enough, she fell in the garden without her thing on. So, good. A stylus will work on an iPhone. Good. Okay, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Dr. Thank you so much, Dr. Burnight. Thank you, everybody, for your good questions. I look forward to seeing you next week.
I'm going to get a puppy.
You're getting a puppy today. Congratulations.